Holy crap! Grillo's AftershockXL show with your host, Steve Grillo. How the hell did you get a TV show?
What up, everybody? Steve Grillo. You're watching Grillo's AftershockXL here on YouTube and Facebook. I want to thank everybody for coming on, tuning in, and checking everything out, subscribing, liking, just being there for me the whole time. It's much appreciated. So I want to give something back for everybody. I want to just remember back in the day when we watched like a TV show, and one episode of the season was a very special episode. Like the time that Dudley got diddled on Different Strokes. Well, this is a special episode. No titty and fart jokes. No celebrity. Well, actually, somebody is sort of a celebrity. I take that back. But I wanted to do a show about the severity of what's going on in the world today, what's happening outside. And I wanted people to have their eyes open and really take this seriously, because the two people I have on, one is a survivor and one is neck deep in the front line. So I want this to be hopefully something that helps you and makes you realize what the fuck is going on. And we can't take this lightly. You really can't do any unnecessary shit. You have to pay attention, and you have to listen to what the next two people coming on have to say. And someone asked me last night, I did another podcast promoting this podcast, and I was telling him about what the show is going to be today. And he goes, well, don't you think people are going to tune out? Because it's just, they're going to, they don't want to hear this. Well, I hope that people don't tune out and they really do sit and listen. But my answer to that was, if I do this and one person listens and decides to change one thing that they do and it stops them from getting this fucking virus, then I did my job. That's all I have to say. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my next two guests. One of them is a survivor. He's a comedian. He's an author. And he's like probably one of the nicest guys in the planet, Mr. Jeffrey Gurian.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
It's great being on with you, man.
Well, it's great to see you. All I can say is it's fucking wonderful to see you. And my other guest is one of my best friends and maybe one of the best doctors in the country, Dr. Dan.
Hey, Steve. Whoop, let me get it there.
Yeah, what's up, Dr. D?
All is good. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. And I hope that we can do some good out of this, because both of you have great stories. Now, I would like to sit and listen to Jeffrey's story. But, Dan, I'd like you to chime in at certain points where you say, how this all works, because you're on the front line. You get the doctors. You know what's going on with everything. So, yeah. Jeffrey, how long were you suffering from this?
It's 7 weeks, and I'm still having some symptoms. I wouldn't say that I'm sick, but I'm nervous. I had a coughing jag earlier today. I was diagnosed with COVID double pneumonia, and I never had pneumonia before, so I didn't know what to expect. But I got sick on March 11th.
How did you know? What made you say, oh, shit, something's up? Like, what was the first time you said, this isn't cool?
I was sick for 2 weeks before I went to the hospital.
I'm talking about the first symptoms that you got. What was it? Like,
I was sneezing and coughing.
Okay.
And preface it to say, besides performing, I covered the comedy scene. So I was going out. We had already been warned. Everybody knew about the pandemic, but there was no social distancing yet. So I was still trying to kind of carry on leading my life the way I had been. I was going to a few different shows, not performing, but covering the shows. I did a podcast with Ron Bennington at the comic strip, from Sirius XM. And it was just the two of us. We didn't let anybody else in the club, just the two of us and my crew. And everybody stayed far apart. And the next day I went to see Jerry Seinfeld at the 92nd Street Y. And that was on March 8th. And people were still congregating. There was a packed auditorium. And then on Tuesday, the night before I got sick, I was at a National Lampoon show. And people were already nervous there. A lot of people didn't show up. It was still a good crowd, but there were people who didn't show up, and people were not really shaking hands. They were fist bumping and kind of sitting to themselves, trying to keep some space between them. The next day, I started sneezing and coughing, and I thought it was just a cold. I was hoping it was just a cold. The day after that, my throat started to bother me, which is usually what happens when I get a cold. It goes to my throat, and I always keep Z-Pak in the house. I didn't know that hospitals were using Z-Pak with Plaquenil and zinc to try and fight this thing. But
Dan, is that something you guys are doing?
I think initially at that point in time, they thought it was helpful, but that really has not been shown to be helpful. More people have been hurt by Plaquenil than helped, it turned out. But it took us a little bit of time to figure that out.
Now, Dan, you look, by the way, Jeffrey, you look fantastic, by the way, for someone who's gone through all you've gone through.
It's pure luck, man.
I just want everybody, Jeffrey has been a New York icon staple. He is at every, I was talking with Mason Reese about you because we were both like happy that you were out and recovered. And Mason, because I don't know how you get out so much. Jeffrey gets invited to every cool thing. And Mason had one of the funniest lines. He said, Jeffrey Gurian will be at the opening of a tuna can. But Jeffrey gets in all the cool clubs and everything like that. And just know there was a great community out here that were pulling for you big time.
No, I know. And, I have to say how much that means when you're so sick. And I was very, very sick when I was in the hospital. It meant so much to me to get so much support from the comedy community. Ron Bennington talked about it on Sirius XM. And I got hundreds and hundreds of messages from people. Comedians made me a video, a get well video, where they talked about experiences that they had with me. And I got messages from Nick Kroll and John Mulaney and Bill Burr and Jim Norton and just on Bert Kreischer. Gad Elmaleh called me from Paris. And, it may seem simple to people, but when you're alone, when you're suffering alone, which is how most people are during this pandemic, if you don't have a family with you, you're by yourself. It's very hard to be so sick when you're alone. And it really helps to know that you have the support of other people. I'm a big believer in the power of prayer and thought. And when so many people are focusing their thought on the same thing, I believe that it has an effect. Nobody knows for sure, but I'm open to all positive things. And to me, I feel like it helped me a lot.
So now you started sneezing and coughing, then it went to your throat, and you had the Z-Pak. Now go from there.
I personally, I don't know how you feel about this, Dan, but I believe that saved my life because I didn't have breathing problems. That was the only symptom I didn't have. My breathing stayed okay. I had a fever. Well, stupidly, I had this old-time thermometer that they must have used in Russia in 1810. It was one of those old glass and mercury thermometers that you have to shake down. It's almost impossible to read. So I didn't get a good reading until I went to the hospital. But when I got there, I had 102.4. Not only did my throat hurt, my whole body started to ache. I was nauseous literally from morning to night, which to me is one of the worst symptoms. Nausea is so horrible. And usually when you're nauseous, you can throw up and it'll go away. But not with this. It didn't stop. It didn't let me throw up. I tried because I thought that would help. I had night sweats, so that usually when you have fever and you have night sweats, the fever breaks. In this case, I'd have night sweats, the bed would be wet, the fever would feel like it broke, and then it would come back again, like right away.
Is this your experience too, Dan?
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah.
From morning to night. Sometimes when you're sick, you could find a comfortable place for yourself to lay down, a cool spot on the bed. There was nothing that I could do. I took Dramamine for the dizziness. It didn't help. Nothing that I had on hand helped. I had full body chills where at times my body would shake to the point where I couldn't hold a glass. When that happened to me in the hospital, they covered me with 4 blankets to try to stop the shaking. I couldn't believe my body was out of control. I don't know how I lasted through this for 14 days. I kept thinking it was going to go away. I called my physician on Friday, March 20th, and I told him how sick I was. And he said, because of my heart condition, I'm in a high risk category because I had a stent put. I had a widowmaker heart attack in 2015 that came out of nowhere. And because of that, I was considered a high risk. So my physician said I should probably be in the hospital. Well, somehow I waited another 6 days. I don't know how. I was nervous to go to the emergency room because they always say there's a lot of germs in the emergency room. And I was afraid that I'd get even sicker.
Yeah, I believe that.
After 14 days of torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I literally, I was distraught. I felt hopeless. I didn't know what to do. And I knew I had to call the ambulance, and I didn't want to call in the middle of the night. I don't know if you ever had to call an ambulance, but it's really scary to have to call 911. Hopefully you'll never need to.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't want to go in the middle of the night. As a doctor myself, I know that a lot of times there's not very experienced people working in the middle of the night on their shift. I wanted to wait till the morning. So somehow I got through, and I hadn't been dressed. I've been wearing like pajamas, and you can't go to the hospital like that. I had to get dressed. I started in my confusion. I wasn't thinking straight. I'm like, what do you wear to go to the hospital?
I bet your hair was still perfect though.
I posted a picture of me in my emergency room bed, and people said that my hair fell a little bit. It was,
Yeah.
I was so sick. My hair was limp. It didn't even, so I dragged myself to the shower, and I knew I had to wear comfortable clothes that are easy to take off because they need to check your vital signs. They need to take blood, start an IV. So I put on track pants and sneakers and a t-shirt and a hoodie like this and a sport jacket. So I had pockets to keep my ID and some cash and stuff like that. I even put on cologne. That's how confused I was.
I would have done that.
I sprayed cologne on myself, right? I don't know who I thought I was going to meet. And then I realized I had to pack a bag, and I didn't know what to take with me. And I actually Googled what to take to the hospital, because when you're that sick, you're not thinking straight. I couldn't even decide what size bag should I take with me. So I grabbed a bag and I put some underwear in and some other things that I thought were necessities. And I finally got the courage to dial 911. And they interviewed me about my symptoms, because at the time, I guess they were already overloaded in New York City. And they weren't just sending an ambulance for anyone who asked. But by that time, I was bleeding from my nose. Like every time I would blow my nose and sneeze, just red blood would come out. It might have been from my blood thinners that I'm on, who knows? But that was one of my symptoms. They told me, and when I told them about my heart condition, you know, they asked me how my breathing was, and I said, I'm breathing okay. But because of all my other symptoms, they said, we're sending an ambulance for you. And I feel like they came pretty quickly. And I left my door open, which is good to do, because in case you can't get to the door, you want the ambulance crew to get into your house. They don't have to break down the door. So people should know that. If you ever need an ambulance, unlock your door. So I live in a big building with a doorman. They came in, and they were very impressed that I could get on the stretcher by myself, because these two guys came in and were so nice. And this first guy was so kind, and he took my hand and he said to me, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And that meant so much. I can't tell you, when I was that sick, for somebody to give me that little bit of encouragement. He said, he's already transported a lot of sick people, but he said my physical presentation was the best that he'd seen. So I hopped up on the stretcher, and they strapped me in, and they put 2 masks over me, and they wheeled me into the ambulance. And I asked them to take me to a hospital where my cardiologist was. They said it was too far. They were taking me to NYU Langone, which turned out to be perfect, because I had taught at NYU for 12 years, and I had a connection. I felt a connection there. And they happened to be doing studies. And I know, Dan, even though nobody's convinced whether Plaquenil works or not, maybe it was a placebo, I felt that it helped me. They were doing studies with it, and they had it on hand. A lot of hospitals didn't even have it, from what I understand. And I know, trained as a scientist, doctors want to see studies, in-depth studies on thousands of people, not on 30 people, to really feel whether something works or not. But when you're that sick, you're grasping at straws. I would have taken anything that they gave me. So they brought me to the emergency room, and they wheeled me into a cubicle. My diastolic pressure, which, you know how they say 120/80 is considered normal, or 110/70 these days, my diastolic had dropped to 42. And they had a hard time getting a vein to start an IV. They had to go into my hands. And they put me in a cubicle, and they put me next to a woman who was literally screaming with every exhalation. Not exaggerate. Every time she exhaled, it was a scream. It was so disturbing, I can't tell you, but I had to flip that thought in my mind and say to myself how scared this woman must be, or how much pain she must be in. because I laid in the emergency room for hours. And at some point, they took my temperature, it was 102.4. They did a chest X-ray of me on the gurney and an ultrasound of my lungs. And a pulmonary specialist came to see me and said that I had double pneumonia. They did 3 nasal swabs of me, which they apologized for. You know, in hospitals, they do a lot of stuff that's not particularly comfortable. And they don't usually apologize first. But with the nasal swabs, they're like, we're sorry, this is going to be uncomfortable. And they put a thing up your nose that feels like they're touching your brain. And to be honest with you, I didn't really care. It didn't bother me that much. It was kind of weird. They did it 3 times. And they diagnosed me as having double pneumonia. And they were actually considering sending me home because my breathing seemed to be okay. And I begged them. I said, look, I live alone and I'm so sick. I can't do it anymore. I can't take care of myself. And I think when they saw the x-rays and the ultrasound, they decided to keep me. And they wheeled me to a room, an isolation room, a negative pressure room, which I understand means that the air doesn't circulate outside. And it was a gorgeous room. I couldn't appreciate it. It was a room that they had been using for cancer patients. They took a whole wing. They moved the cancer patients someplace else, and they created a COVID wing in isolation. So only one person could come into your room at a time. They were very strict with the PPE. They covered me, you know, and the room was I had a room that was overlooking the East River. It had a beautiful view. If I was well, I could have really appreciated being in there. There was a TV that was the whole length of the wall. I never saw such a big TV. And you were supposed to use that to control the lights and the shades. And you're supposed to order your meals on that. And nobody knew how to really work it because the staff was so overworked at NYU that they were taking nurses from different floors who weren't really familiar with these rooms. They figured out how to do it so they could get me food because by the time I got there, I had already missed lunch and I was feeling weak from being empty. I was so nauseous. I didn't know if the nausea was from what I had or from not eating. So they were kind enough to get me a meal. And not that I was able to eat a lot, but I ate some. They had lemon ices. They actually had great food in the hospital, which is not what you would expect. And on my second day in that room was when they started me on the Plaquenil. I got a double dose in the morning and a double dose at night, 400 milligrams in the morning and 400 milligrams at night. They didn't give me more Z-Pak because I had already taken it for 10 days. And they gave me zinc, 50 milligrams of zinc.
Dan, does that sound about normal?
Yes, that's how we were treating people at that time. You know,
okay.
NYU is a great place, and you couldn't have been in a better place. The doctors there are really on top of everything. Did you feel lonely, Jeff? A lot of my patients who are in, you know, that isolated room tell me how lonely it is and how they crave contact with people.
I actually felt safe. I didn't feel like I could be around other people. I was, you know, when people tell you that you have this illness where other people could contract it from you, I was glad actually to be alone. And it was amazing to have a private room because when they moved me to a room with 3 other very sick men. And that was basically a nightmare for me. When you're really sick, there's something comforting actually about being alone. At least there was for me. The nurses were very kind. There were nurses that took my hand and sat with me when they had a free moment. I mean, most of the time they were very busy, but there were a couple that really went out of their way to encourage me that I was going to get better.
This is why we go upstairs at 7 o'clock, and I applaud all those people.
Do you know that when I got home and I heard that, it brought tears to my eyes to see people expressing their gratitude that way? Because
the whole city does, and it's well deserved.
It's so well deserved. It's unbelievable that these people put their lives on the line, like yourself, Dan.
Well, yeah, like Dan, you know.
Doctors and nurses have died from COVID at NYU.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure. On the second day, they took out my oxygen to see how I would do on my own because I had the cannula in my nose. And my oxygen registered at 95 to 96% on my own. And they said that was great. That was a great sign. I had pain in my back. Like the first day they were so overrun, I didn't have a pillow on my bed. They couldn't find a pillow for me. They were using so many supplies. They took they had blankets that were very rough, and they rolled one up and they put it behind me to use, and it slipped down. I wound up with a rash that was so bad that they took pictures of it. They couldn't believe it. They didn't know if it was a reaction to medication. They thought it was probably from the rough blanket. But on the second day, they got more bedding. They got more supplies. And they brought me pillows. And as I said, they took out the oxygen. They said I was doing fine. And they told me that the next day they were probably going to move me. And I said, why? And I had a huge bathroom to myself. I mean, it was really, I had to drag myself to it. I was attached to machines so they could monitor my vital signs. But they taught me that I could detach it when I went to the restroom and just reattach it myself. Again, only one person was allowed in at a time. So you had to tell them what you needed before they came into the room, because if you forgot something, they couldn't just come back in, because I guess, you know, they couldn't waste the gowns and the gloves and the masks to keep coming back and forth. So you had to be prepared to know what you needed when you called for somebody to come and see you. They told me they were going to have to move me, and I was kind of disturbed because I was starting to feel a little bit comfortable. The nausea had gone away. They used Reglan on me. They started me with Zofran, but that wore off very quickly, and the nausea came back. And I said, I really need something stronger. So they gave me Reglan IV, which they said they use for cancer patients who were nauseous from the chemo. And I feel so sorry for people like that, because nausea to me, it's just horrible to be nauseous constantly. And so they had to move me, and they took me to another part, the Tisch Center. It's part of NYU, but in another part of the hospital. And they put me out in the hall until they could find a nurse to take care of me, because everybody was busy. And I heard somebody say bed 4, and I realized I wasn't going to be alone. I was the first person in this room. They put me near the window, and about an hour or two later, they brought in a very elderly Chinese man who was very sick and couldn't speak English. And I was so nervous for him. He was choking. He was choking so badly that I thought he was dying. I called the nurse on his behalf because he couldn't speak. And he was coughing into the air, and which also made me nervous for myself, because I'm very vulnerable, but there was no other place they could put me. Across from me in the third bed, a man came in who couldn't stop throwing up. And in the fourth bed, they brought in an Orthodox Jewish man who had to be rushed to a ventilator because his oxygen dropped very suddenly from 93 to 80, which I understand is fairly common with this, that it can suddenly stop your breathing out of nowhere. So
yeah, do you experience that?
Yeah, even you see lower numbers than that, where normally if you see somebody with a low saturation, they look like death, but people with COVID could look fairly comfortable and have even numbers half that high.
Well, yeah, that's what happened to our mutual friend Todd's father. They took him off the oxygen, and they were going to release him, and then he passed like all of a sudden.
Unbelievable. Within minutes, this happened. He was 93. There was a nurse with him. And all of a sudden, she called for help. His oxygen dropped to 80 within just minutes. So what was horrible is that we're all sharing this one small bathroom. Well, that wasn't my experience. I had never had to do anything like that before. It was very uncomfortable. They covered me with ice packs. They put ice packs on my head, under my arms, which you might think would be uncomfortable, but it wasn't. It actually felt great. Ice packs on my ankles, I think. They brought my fever down. And that was another thing that brought me to tears. I finally saw 98.6. I couldn't believe it, that my fever came down. It made a very big difference in the way I felt. They kept bringing me, I have to say, the menu there was so impressive. Like grilled salmon and potatoes. And
what? I don't have that shit here.
I'm telling you, if I had been healthy, I would have loved to be there. There was a choice of a very long menu of things, and fruit, apples, and and apple juice and just anything you wanted. It was really a very extensive menu. There were times I couldn't eat anything for a few hours. You know, it made me so lethargic that it was a very interesting thing. I could think of something for an hour before I could actually do it. If even if I wanted to change my position, I would think to myself, yeah, I want to move. I couldn't do it for about an hour. I had to keep thinking about it. Or I wanted to reach for a tissue. You know, they had these amazing soft tissues that I kept asking for because I was just sneezing and coughing. And these symptoms were kind of nonstop. So on the fourth day, they said that they were going to discharge me and they wanted to see if they could get me out before noon. And they were so busy.
So after your fever broke, were you still not feeling well? Were you still nauseous? Were you still like coughing and everything?
I went away from the Reglan. They kept me on that. I think they were only allowed to give it to me like twice a day. It lasted for quite a long time. And the extra strength Tylenol helped a lot. They kept me on that too. But even so, you know, every time you need medication, they can't just give it to you. It has to be requisitioned. Someone has to sign, and then they have to get it from the pharmacy. And when they're very busy, that can take hours. There was one time where they told me, your Tylenol is here, and it's at the door. And the door was about 15 feet from my bed. And it took more than 2 hours for me to get it.
Jesus Christ.
And I couldn't complain because I was so grateful because the people were so busy. It wasn't like they were wasting time. They were dealing, you know, as a patient, you're not allowed out in the halls. You can't wander around to see, but I could get a sense of what was happening. You know, every once in a while, a nurse would spend a few minutes with me. There was a couple in particular that were so kind. And I said, it's like a science fiction movie. And they said, right. They didn't even know how to process it.
Yeah. Dan, what's going on over by you? What's going on? Tell me what's up.
Well, I think things are much better from where I am than in New York. But that really, Jeff is very lucky about his story that he seemed to have responded to the treatment so quickly. He didn't need oxygen for that long. I mean, he not only had the COVID, but he had pneumonia on top of that. So your story has a very happy ending. Of course,
it's amazing.
It took a while to feel well. You know, there's a difference between being unsick and being well. It could take you weeks or months to be well, but I mean, you look great.
By the way, Dan, I was just going to say that it's so good to see your face. You haven't fucking aged at all, you son of a bitch.
Man, what state are you in? I don't know. Where are you located?
I'm in Colorado.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So, you know, Dan is my, you know, when I didn't, Dan, I just go to Dan for everything because I trust him. I always equate doctors to like mechanics. You know, you can go in and you need an oil change, and they're going to tell you you need a new carburetor. You just like, that's just it. But so I always have Dan as my ace in my pocket.
No, that's a wonderful thing. To have a doctor as a friend is amazing. Somebody that you can call. And
he's helped friends and family in the past just by basically going, no, they shouldn't be doing that. You know, so. Of course, I go and I get in touch with Dan when this first breaks out, and Dan, it kind of took me back and made me really vigilant about taking care of, you know, the rules. Following the rules is the whole point of all this, because Dan says, it goes, it's too late. It's out there, and you can't stop it.
I think everybody has to assume that they've been exposed. That's a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
Whether you have any symptoms or not, whether you feel perfectly healthy, to feel that you've been exposed and to follow the rules. I'm afraid to go out. I'm not ready to leave the house yet after 7 weeks. Luckily, I have a kind neighbor who's been shopping for me, an angel. She asks me what I need, and I give her a list, and she leaves it in front of my door. The doormen, everybody here is masked with gloves. They have caution tape around the concierge desk in the lobby, so you can't even approach them too closely. And they don't let delivery men come up. If somebody brings something to the building, they bring it up and leave it outside your door. They're very strict here, but there are people across the country that are trying to open things up already. And I think, look, this is a very serious illness. You know, if you've had it, you know. And there seem to be different strains. Some people get away very mildly. There was a lot of people much worse than me. I consider it a miracle that I'm out. You know, I'm not complaining at all. I'm very grateful. But I see, like, yesterday I felt great. Last night I didn't feel so good. I took another Tylenol and I tried to go to bed early. Something in my head, I feel like there's something lingering inside of me that's trying to make me sick again. I'll get a coughing jag. And it's not a productive cough. It's kind of a dry cough. But because I never had pneumonia before, my own physician said to me that there are residual effects of having pneumonia. When I got home, I wound up with pleurisy about a week later. Every time I took a breath, I got a sharp pain in my back and into my right shoulder. So I went back on Z-Pak and it got rid of it in a few days. My feet swell up. You know, I never had that before. And now they're talking about people getting blood clots. You know, that Broadway actor, Nick Cordero, had to lose his leg, and they said it was because of COVID. So I'm very concerned about it. I bought a special pillow so I can sleep with my legs elevated, and the swelling is gone in the morning. But from sitting, you know, everybody's staying home watching TV or at their computer. There's not a lot to do. I think it's important to walk and be active, you know. But I have this fear inside of me. I feel like I have PTSD, to be honest with you. When you go through a trauma like that, it affects you in some way.
What about you, Dan? How are you dealing with this?
I totally have PTSD from taking care of the patients. I'm not afraid about getting it myself that much. I can't remember when the last time I've seen so many sick patients. I mean, the good news is, at least here in Colorado, that we're on the downside of the curve. It is the you know, 3 weeks ago the ICUs were filled up and we were on overflow, and now actually there's one ICU closed in my institution and they're all in one ICU and there is no overflow. I mean, so that is huge. Absolutely. Compared to what it was. And 6 weeks ago, the whole hospital was just filled with the patients. But again, what I'd say is that the ones I'm seeing now are sicker than the ones that I saw before. And also patients who had heart disease or other problems were ignoring it and now are coming in with much more extreme presentations.
It's crazy.
You know what? I would have loved to be able to go to my cardiologist, but nobody's in. Most of the doctors in New York, their offices are closed. And, you know, hopefully when this blows over, I'll be checked. But that's something. I went in February and they gave me a good report. I also have a mitral valve prolapse with regurgitation. And, you know, I'm a possible candidate for surgery. But when I went in February, he said to me, your heart actually looks better than it did before. They did an echocardiogram on me. But I would like to be checked. When I was at NYU, there was nobody available. There was no cardiologist to see me. They suggested that I just see the pulmonary specialist because that was the focus.
Now, Dan, what's like if you get it and you recover, is that are you? You know how like the things like, you know, you're immune to it after that? Is that the case, or
we just don't know yet? There's so many things we don't know, and so many times, like the Plaquenil story. Everybody thought the Plaquenil worked and the Zithromax. And look, Jeff, I'm glad you're better, but the studies show that it doesn't help. And even this Remdesivir, that helps, but we need better treatments than that. We need much more effective treatments, but it's better than placebo. And that's the only treatment that has been shown to work. And you're right that we're anticoagulating patients now because of their risks of clot, and maybe also delaying ventilation a little better. We're learning, but we're so close to the wall that we need a little break from this to take a few steps back to analyze everything. You know, everybody is so exhausted from taking care of these very sick patients. You know, you're only staring at the wall an inch of, you know, what's right in front of you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
A lot of the EMTs in New York are suffering because they're seeing a lot of people that have not survived. And that's got to be very, very hard. They're getting to people's homes where they've already passed away. and they tried to pass a law in New York. The directive was not to try and resuscitate people if they coded, and the EMTs were not listening to that. They said, no, we want to try anyway, but the instructions were not to do that.
What about this Hasidic community and their inability to not gather? Like how does this, like, that's going to be, you know, that's fine if that's what they want to do, but then they go shop in the stores where everybody else is. Now, like,
I don't understand it. I have a friend who's a rabbi in Brooklyn. He doesn't understand it either. I don't know. There are people that are fanatics in every religion, I guess, and that's their belief. I don't understand why they don't understand that they're endangering each other.
Yeah, and I don't. It's scary because they're just gonna, like, it's not like they stay in their confined communities. They get sick in there, and then they go out and they spread it to people that are, you know, just trying to go get lettuce and tomatoes, you know.
And they've also suffered a lot. I mean, you know, it's something like 55 rabbis have died in New York.
Wow.
From COVID, and so they know.
I know, but they still. So someone dies, and then they have a funeral, and they all gather again, and the guy died from probably the last funeral he got sick from.
You know what? It's a very insular community too. They don't really spread out amongst people that are not in their community, so they're the most at danger. But what I wanted to say was something that you mentioned earlier. The hospital called me to see how I was doing, and I asked them that very question. Should I consider myself that I have any kind of immunity, or do I stand a chance of recatching this thing? Because that's what I'm nervous about when I get these little symptoms. And they said, to be honest, we don't know, just like Dr. Dan said, that there's not enough time yet. We're in the midst of this thing. There's not enough information to really know. And for me personally, I'm scared. I heard that there were people in Japan that recaught this thing, that they recovered and then they got it again.
Yeah, Korea, actually, I think. But
Korea, I thought it was Japan, but I couldn't go through. I mean,
this is why I wanted to do this show, because people really need to hear this, and they really need to get it through their thick skulls that this is fucking real. It's not going away, and people are fucking dying horrifically. And
if you have to do it, you're just lucky. That's all. You have to follow the rules. Social distancing. If you don't have to go out, don't go out.
Yeah, and well, what annoys me is the people who say, the only people who die are the old and the sick, and they would have died anyway. And that is so irritating to me. I mean, look, that's like saying you, Jeff, you know, you had heart disease, so you deserve to die from COVID anyway.
There's a world of morons out there, you know. Not everyone is blessed with any intelligence, and you realize that when you read the comments on some of these things, when you go on the internet and you see there are people in states demonstrating that they must go back to work already, that they must look. I guess every state is hit, you know, not every state is the same. New York was hit particularly hard. So it's nice that Colorado is on the downturn, you know, with that. But some states may have gotten away without having a lot. In New York City, you'd have to be crazy to start congregating. The comedy clubs, I talked to all the owners, they're hoping that something will happen in the future, but nobody's planning anything. They're doing shows online, you know, they're doing podcasts, they're doing just what we're doing now with comedians talking about stuff. But nobody is projecting that there's going to be clubs full of people again. I think what's going to happen is that they'll open at half capacity. And not put in so many, and you have to space the table so people, because I think people are afraid. There's a lot of people that are really scared to go out and interact with people again. And I think it's going to take a while till things get back to the way they used to be.
I don't even know if that's going to happen. Or could you see, like once this starts to calm down, could you see yourself at a concert in Madison Square Garden?
Well, that's what they asked me last night. The comedy club owners said to me, when do you think you'd feel comfortable coming out? I didn't have a good answer for that. If they said if June 1st was the date when clubs were going to open, I said, well, I'd have to see what's happening around May 25th and see what the statistics are, because I'm in no hurry to mix in a crowd. Once you've been through this thing, you know, it's hard for people to experience another person's pain. You can empathize, you can hear the story, you can feel bad for them, but unless you've actually experienced it, you don't know how bad something is, you know? And knowing what I know, I'm in no hurry to be around other people. You know, it's not fun being alone all these weeks. And especially if you haven't been sick, a lot of people are probably really bored. If I was just home feeling perfectly for 7 weeks, I might be going stir crazy too. But I've been sick for most of the time, so it doesn't feel like I've been alone that long.
Well, you have this, you have us, you have a great circle of friends, and you know that we're all here for you.
Thank you, Steve. That helped a lot.
Really, what it is that by the time people feel comfortable going back out in public and doing those activities, I worry that we're not too far away from the second wave. I mean, there's going to be a second wave of this. There's no question about it. And whether it occurs in November or December or before then, we just don't know. There's so much about this that we don't know. But we do know about hospital capacity, and we have at least some treatments now. But what the future is going to look like come this fall, I think the summer is going to be a good summer. I think people may actually start things, not go to things when they could, and by the time they feel comfortable, that's when I worry the second wave is going to happen.
Why do they feel sure that there'll be a second wave? Is that common for a virus?
Yes. I mean, look at the flu pandemic of 1918. More people died in November than with the original wave. And in fact, more people died in November, I think, than all the wars of the 20th century combined.
Wow. I wasn't aware of those statistics, but that's really scary. So that's what's on my mind too. You know, like I said, I have this fear and I think it's tied in with the PTSD. I don't think you can avoid having, if you're a human being and you go through something like that, and on your end, treating such sick people and seeing such an overwhelming amount of sick people, it has to affect you. A person can only take so much stress. You know, it's amazing that you're able to show up every day. It's a tribute to the way doctors are trained and nurses are trained. They know that that's why they went into the profession in the first place, to help people. I think that they would feel bad if they stayed home worried about getting sick themselves, but they have families. They're concerned about bringing it home. A lot of people in New York City, they stay in hospitals. I mean, in hotels. They don't go home. The mayor has arranged for certain hotels to accommodate nurses and doctors so that they wouldn't have to take a chance and bring it home to their families. It's something that people have never experienced before. And in a crazy way, it's bringing the world together. It's the only thing I remember in my lifetime for the entire world to be experiencing something at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, if you remember back to the 90s and in HIV, now granted, it only affected, you know, homosexuals and IV drug users, and, you know, not everybody was at risk unless they were exposed to blood, but patients were just as sick then. You saw young men dying in their prime, and it was we took on risks treating them. And now HIV is very treatable. You know, thank goodness people don't die from that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's we just need time, and whether time is 6 months or a year, I don't know.
Nobody knows, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
We pray to be strong enough that we can get through this. That's all.
Gentlemen, I thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, if this saves one person, I did my job. But I think it's pretty clear about what what you went through, Jeff, and what you're going through, Dan. That people need to pay attention and really listen to what people are telling them, and just don't be complacent. You can't be complacent right now. Don't take any unnecessary risks. You know, I was like telling people, like, you know, I got my motorcycle down here. It's beautiful out. I really want to go for a ride right now. But, you know, God forbid something happens. I've seen people go down on a motorcycle for just stupid reasons. And if I go down on the bike, that means it's one ambulance that ain't going to be there for someone else. So one hospital bed, one doctor. And you know what? They're going to know that I was out taking an unnecessary risk. I'm going to be stuck in the broom closet because they got other things to take care of, you know?
It's not a good time to get sick with anything else. It's never a good time to get sick, but particularly now, you know, any kind of an injury where you'd have to go to a hospital, it's a very risky thing.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Jeff. Dan, did I see Liam walk by before?
You know, Liam's downstairs.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
He's on his Minecraft.
Okay, I'm sure. All right, well, tell everybody I said hello. I love them and I missed them. I thank you guys for coming on, and hopefully...
I just want to say, Dan, it was great being on with you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Guys,
Jeff,
thank you so
I'm
much.
so glad you're doing well.
Yeah,
Thank
so am I. Stay
Thank
strong,
you.
Jeff.
Yep.
Doing my best. Thanks so much.
All right.
See you guys.
All right, guys, thanks. So there you have it. It's if that doesn't open your eyes, I don't know what else to do. But at least I did my part, and now you have a little insight to what the fuck is going on, because it's different, scary, and I don't mean to, like, I hope this didn't bring anybody down. But if it scared you a little bit to maybe being a little more safer or not choosing that one decision that could make you catch this stupid thing, I feel good about it. And I thank you so much for listening. All my sponsors, just I'll go through them real quick. Bright Shot, Prosecco Palms, F Sharp Tax Management, Sterling Assault, I'm having a brain fart. I'm sorry. Battle Chats. Don't forget Battle Chats. You can go there and watch it. Party Bibs. And all of them for being here. I hope this show does some good. I hope this show was informative and you see exactly what's really going on out there. I want everybody to stay safe, and I thank you very much for tuning in. And I hope this helps you out. Thank you. Awesome. Well, if you made it this far, maybe you want to go a little further. There'll be a little video thing somewhere around here, I think. I don't know. You can watch another video, and you can subscribe. Another button. Just click and have fun. Click and play with yourself. Well, yeah, go ahead. You can do both.